A young Sioux woman from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota faces the camera. The photo is taken by Jesse H. Bratley, a teacher who worked in Native schools between 1893 and 1903. Traveling through different communities, he photographed habits, faces, and daily life, creating a collection that shows Native culture in the middle of a time of deep historical change. In 1900, at the Greater America Exposition in Omaha, Native people were invited to show their rituals, ways of life, and demands. Among them was Iron Hawk, an Oglala Lakota leader from the Sioux Nation. His presence as a delegate marked the fair and affirmed, in the midst of the rapid changes in the United States, the resistance of Lakota culture in insisting on being heard. In the early 20th century in Montana, Chief Lewison led the Flathead people. In 1908, N.A. Forsyth photographed him for the Underwood and Underwood Agency. The image goes beyond a simple portrait. It's a moment of leadership and continuity, where a face connects collective memory, land, and the persistence of a story that runs through generations. At the turn of the 19th century, L.A. Huffman was after more than simple records. He wanted scenes that would stay alive over time. He worked at a company focused on stereoscopic photographs, which were new because of their sense of depth. In 1880, he produced a striking portrait of Spotted Eagle, leader of the Itazipcho Lakota tribe, also known as Sans Arc. Deep in Arizona, Canyon de Chelly holds the memories of a people. There, a Navajo woman spins sheep's wool and turns the yarn into rugs and blankets that are passed down through generations. The scene is captured by Karl Moon, a photographer, painter, and writer who, in the early 20th century, dedicated himself to portraying the life and heritage of Native American peoples. At the end of the 19th century, a young woman from the Ute Nation faces the camera in a posed portrait. Coming from the mountains of the western United States, she carries with her a language shaped by nomadism. Her dark dress, with fringes and embroidery, asserts her identity and is also part of a collection dedicated to recording indigenous life and culture of that time. In one photograph, two Oglala Lakota leaders of the Sioux people pose with a U.S. officer. On the left is American Horse, an interpreter and scout in military operations. On the right is Red Cloud, the chief who led the war over the Powder River Territory. Between them is Frank North in uniform, commander of the Pawnee Scouts, allies of the Army. In the photograph, Bird Wild Hog, also called Hedgehog, a member of the Cheyenne, looks into the lens. The portrait was taken in 1890 by Christian Barthelmess at Fort Keogh, Montana, and shows an Army scout whose path echoes that of his father, a Northern Cheyenne leader in the 1879 escape, a milestone of persistence in protecting traditions under intense pressure. In 1880 in the United States, L.A. Huffman photographed in Montana a member of the Crow Nation, a people of the plains and mountains tied to hunting. In the portrait, he appears in his own traditional clothing and holds a weapon, a clear sign of the work that sustained the group, hunting buffalo, elk, and other game that provided food for the community. Known among the Cree as Keogh and in English as Bob Small, he moved between Canada and the United States throughout his life. It is said that the nickname came from a tail haircut, uncommon among indigenous people. In 1906, he went to Butte, Montana, where he was photographed by F.E. Piso, leaving the image as a record of that visit. On the banks of the Little Bighorn River near Billings, Montana, a young man from the Crow Nation adjusts his ceremonial outfit before entering the big gathering of the peoples of the Great Plains. It is the beginning of the 20th century, and the Crow Indian Fair is taking shape as an annual fair that celebrates gatherings, reaffirms traditions, and keeps stories from the past alive as they are passed down from generation to generation. In the southwestern United States, among the Laguna people, Keotati was born. Her name carried ancestral memory, but on official papers versions like Loti or Lotaatsi appeared, created by Spanish and American colonizers. In 1904, living in Laguna Pueblo, New Mexico, she was shaping her identity in the middle of the changes that were transforming the community. Matawitcotco, also recorded as Matawitco or Matawitco, belonged to the Yanktonai of the Dakota people. His name could mean brown bear, crazy, or foolish brown. In 1872, he was photographed by Alexander Gardner, known for documenting the American Civil War and for portraying Native leaders in Montana, images that circulated widely. In a photograph by N.A. Forsyth, an indigenous group watches a car that has just arrived with the European colonizers. The scene does not show only curiosity, it reveals the clash between ancestral ways of life and a machine that opens new routes, announcing deep changes in the daily life and relationships of these communities, where different times cross. In 1891, photographer John C.H. Grable captured a moment of Lakota life. On the northern plains, teepees are arranged in a circle in the camp. Built with wooden frames and covered with hides or canvas, these homes were practical, set up and taken down quickly, allowing them to follow the seasons and the paths of the hunt. Around 1920, a Kiowa woman from the Great Plains is photographed wearing a dress made of hides, a beaded necklace, an embroidered belt, and a scarf. Every detail speaks of belonging and memory. They are inherited techniques, family stories. Between everyday life and rituals, her clothing protects her body and supports her people's identity, generation after generation. In the photograph, we see Sitting Bull, a Hunkpapa Lakota leader, famous for standing up to United States policies on the Great Plains. The portrait, taken by David Francis Berry around 1880, is part of his series on the West. In his direct gaze at the camera, he turns his own life story into a symbol of resistance and collective pride. In the early 20th century, on the Crow Reservation in Montana, an artisan leans over a hide teepee. Wearing traditional clothing, he prepares brushes, mixes pigments from plants and minerals, and starts to paint. Each line brings back memories of ancestors, and, in a repeated gesture, the community reaffirms its roots and updates old stories. In 1870, a young Iroquois woman poses for a photograph that would be passed down through generations. The image, made by Richard Throssell, an artist of Cree origin adopted by the Crow, is part of his effort to document Native peoples. In the calm framing, the image suggests the strength of the Great Lakes Confederation and its continuity as a living project. In 1877, Garnet, from the Oglala Lakota Nation, one of the 7 Sioux peoples of the northern plains of the United States, poses for photographer Charles Milton Bell. In the portrait, he holds a sacred pipe and wears a headdress, a beaded necklace, and a fur coat. His restrained gesture preserves the memory and prestige of his community in the midst of the changes brought by the country's expansion. On the plains of the American Midwest, Lusaku Rikalahau, from the Pawnee Nation, carries a name tied to the moment when the sun touches the earth. In 1869, the Jackson brothers photograph him in Omaha, recording his presence in a West in transition, where light, land, and memory are woven together in a persistent, watchful silence that resists being forgotten. In 1889, a young Apache woman faces the camera of D.B. Chase, who travels across the Southwest photographing Native peoples. While the click fixes her face, the U.S. government pushes into their territories, imposing borders and assimilation, and her community insists on holding on to land, memory, and ways of life in the face of growing pressure from the state and the settlers. At the end of the 19th century, more than 500 indigenous representatives gather in Omaha for the United States Indian Congress. Among them is American Horse, a Sioux chief, who poses for Adolph F. Muir under the direction of Frank A. Rinehart. The photo places the gathering in 1898 at the Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition, where several nations display their culture. Among the Cheyennes, collective life is organized into 6 military societies, and the Dog Soldiers, or Dogmen, take on the task of keeping order and defense. They follow the council of 44 chiefs, renewed every decade. The Brotherhood gains strength when Sweet Medicine in a cave in the Black Hills receives 4 sacred arrows. In 1879, John K. Hillers photographs 2 young Hopi women in front of an adobe wall in Arizona. Ceremonial clothing, necklaces, and silver earrings mark identities passed down between generations. The image is part of a series of 72 photos from the Bureau of American Ethnology expedition to the Southwest, inviting us to observe Hopi life in the midst of reinvention.